Now, that camera on off issue is still, a big question, but one thing that all teachers seem to agree on is the use of breakout rooms for their cohorts in the morning and their synchronous learning in the afternoon. Zoom's currently is the one platform that really kind of has it nicely organized and built in, but we know that both Google and Office Teams will be adopting that feature coming up. What do you guys think about the use of breakout rooms? Should teachers be leveraging that part of Zoom when they start in November with their new hybrid instructional model?
I love breakout rooms.
if you are not using breakout rooms, then you're just making your life way harder. I've done small group work in there that you wouldn't be able.
Breakout rooms have been very successful, mainly getting students a little bit more comfortable with, as Vincenzo said, with getting, just talking, sharing ideas and things like that. And I found that very successful. I was using Google Classroom at the beginning, and then I've had technical issues with it, and so I switched to Zoom, and then I found that feature, which was fantastic. I've also started to use polls as well. So at the bottom of your Zoom meeting, you could do polls, and it could be just like something to just start a conversation. Like this morning, I usually start my video screen at about 8:20, and so slowly students start popping in, and everyone hears Finnemore's reflection, right? And they mentioned, he was talking about all the Halloween candy, right? So today's poll was, what's your favorite Halloween candy? And I got kids I heard from kids that I've never heard from all semester, which was fantastic. And just stuff like that, just to just maybe a break in your whole teaching. I found it pretty beneficial. It's a good way to also kind of make sure that students are paying attention as well. To throw out a quick question, see where they stand on a particular opinion or something. And yeah, so polls and the breakout rooms have been very successful for me.
Okay, so
I've been using polls too. The polls has been awesome. I started off just like for fun. I did like pineapple on pizza, and then yes or no, and that's like kind of got us talking about that, and they got to know a little bit about me. And then I turned it with my grade 11 college class. We're doing an assignment off the novel that we're looking at, and so there's 6 different choices that they can choose from. So I wanted to create breakout rooms for all of those choices, and then I could go in and explain small group to them. So I wanted to get an idea of who is interested in what. So I did the polling of which assignment are you leaning towards, and then I found out that no one was interested in these 2 other assignments, so I didn't even have to go and bother doing the work with it. they were only interested in these 4, so that's the ones that we used for the assignment. And then use that to transition to our breakout rooms, and it's been amazing.
All right, so breakout rooms and polls, thumbs up from everyone. Okay, we're going to shift over to our next point, which is going to be focusing on lesson planning. So 2.5-hour periods. If you've all taught summer school, then no one's worried about teaching in a 2.5-hour period. You're all cool with that. But what I think that we should spend some time talking about is all of the amazing opportunities that 2.5-hour periods provide. I also want to kind of make the point that the lesson planning kind of has to incorporate making that in-class time so compelling, so useful, so helpful and engaging for the students that they prefer it to the detached online experience. I really think that the embedded goal needs to be helping those students want to back, feel safe in the classroom, and want to come back to regular kind of in-person learning. And I think that that should be kind of a subtle goal tied into the kinds of lessons that you're planning for your in-class portion. I don't know if you agree with that, but I really do think that it's a great opportunity to make sure that we're trying to re-engage a lot of those students, maybe 25% of our students that have opted for a fully online experience. You can do all kinds of interesting things like flip models. You can do more interesting labs, conferences, debates, all kinds of group work tasks. Like I always think of Krisha Radulowski, the former English teacher here. Every time a character died in a novel, the next day was the funeral wake. You got to come dressed in character. You got to eulogize. You got to give a 2 or 3 minute eulogy about the character that died. And there was, at that time, you could bring in food. So there was lots of food. It was a real kind of party. That would be an amazing 2.5-hour lesson that could be compelling for those students that are online and wanting them to be back in the classroom and here with us. One thing that we also wanted to address in this lesson planning is something that you guys have mentioned already, and that is these attendance checks. Scott, in speaking with you, I loved your explanation of, I told these kids to watch this video and answer this question, and only 3 came back. So I lost like 7 kids by the end. So this idea of attendance checks is going to become really important for this online cohort, and doing things like what you guys have already mentioned, polls and surveys, is like an important way to make sure that we are kind of re-engaging these kids, or that we're kind of not losing them. I mean, I would, if you're not paying attention to the chat, or if you're not even seeing someone, if their camera's turned off, how do you even know that they're there, 2 hours into the class? So doing something like polls, like you guys have already mentioned, in the Zoom features, are really kind of important kind of way to re-engage and refocus learners. What are some other important things that you guys are doing with your lesson planning that you think other teachers should be aware of? You guys have mentioned things like week at a glance features, shared calendars.
So I usually give the kids either every morning or every couple of days something on the Google Classroom. It's in the form of the question section when you're creating your material. And it's some sort of question of the day that it's just a normal question about something that's going on in the world, or something that pertains to them, pop culture. It could be watching a little video and reacting to it, looking at an infographic and reacting to it, or reading an article, whatever it is. But they have an amount of time to write their response, but then they also have to respond to someone else in the class as well. So sometimes it's 1 student, sometimes it's 2 students. And I go back and I read all these interactions and these comments, and these kids are having some really rich discussions just by doing this question of the day. And I found that has really worked well for me.
So they know every class there's something that they're going to be responsible for responding to or contributing.
Correct. And then I also use Padlet as well, which could be a simple question of, how are you even feeling today? Or we did something about, now that we've finished 2 weeks of school, how are you feeling about how it's going? Just things like that, even just general things. That as soon as they walk in and sit down, the Padlet's up, or the QR code is up, and then they respond.
I just wanted, since our classes are, an hour and 50 minutes long and so forth right now, one thing that I found very useful is incorporating wellness breaks into the lesson, right? And so that could be something as simple as, okay, let's take a break, stand up, go grab a drink of water, and sit back down, right? We're going to resume in 2 minutes, okay? Or sometimes I'll turn my screen around and we'll do a quick stretch, all right? Everyone get up, we're going to do a quick stretch, do something like that. I think it breaks up it's good for their attention span. There's no way that they can, focus, a teenager can focus for an hour and 50 minutes at a time. So I get a little bit more of their attention. They get breaks from the information, and I've had good responses and good feedback from the kids.
So we'll move on to the next section, which is assessment and evaluation. Catherine, I'm going to ask if you could share your thoughts on even calling something a test with online students.
So my strategy changed throughout this quad. Initially, I was just having kids submit things through Google Classroom, like creating an assignment, and then it creates a copy for them essentially, and then they can just type into it and then click submit. And I was finding that even with what I thought were some pretty clear instructions, I'd be getting things emailed to me and then things shared with me through the OneDrive and screenshots from their phones. And it was very difficult on my end to efficiently collect. And then also there was some little maneuvers about this, I handed it in and they're just sending me a blank and whatever. So I started using Google Forms as a way. I also ended up with plagiarism on my first assignment too, which was disappointing. So I was I need to come up with something that streamlines it for me and for them. So I started using Google Forms exclusively for all my tasks. And I just call everything a task or a response or an activity. I don't use the word test, although I have pulled some stuff from my past tests to use. So a short answer question from one of my tests. And I just try to do more frequent assessment instead of doing a big assessment that I would typically do at the end of a unit. I will pull things, because I have taught this course before, I'll pull things kind of more timely and then just, send me this response. But I call everything a task or a response. And in some cases, it will even be a scenario where it's a multiple choice. They read a scenario on human rights and they pick which one it is, but it's always called a task. And I find that way, I'm not really getting cheating. My class averages are still well within where they would be if I was in person. And everything is essentially open note, right? They can use the PowerPoint. And, I've had to kind of let go of that need for a test. We don't need to test. There's nowhere that says that things have to be a test. So yeah, I'm exclusively using Google Forms, and I find for collecting, it's all in one place for me. It's very predictable for the kids, which is important. And yeah, I think it just comes down to the language of that in terms of maneuvers. I was getting a couple maneuvers on the first assignment, unfortunately, and this cut down on it.
Who else has gotten away with tests entirely?
Me, pretty much. Everything is little mini tasks, like Catherine was saying, little things they do that day, really small. They could take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, but at least it shows that they're engaged and they're thinking about the coursework, right? That they're part of the course, not that because they're not at school for 2 days or 2.5 days that, they can sleep in and not have to worry about the course until they're actually sitting in the room or during the synchronous time that we have together.
Deska?
Yeah, same with me. I've been doing content challenges on just setting up a Google form that's multiple choice, and I haven't been doing any tests whatsoever. I think we can, as teachers, we can use our professional judgment, and we could definitely assess the overall expectations without using tests. There are many other ways to do it, and this online platform has really kind of opened my eyes to that, and it's been working for me so far.
One of the things that Catherine highlighted was the difficulty in managing where students submit these assignments. Scott, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of the ways in which you've addressed this challenge in your classes?
Yeah, and what I found was fascinating, the different platforms, some were actually better than others. So Google was a bit of a hot mess in that it insisted in converting everything that they submit into the Google format, the open ODT format. So for that one, I did what Catherine did, and I just do forms. That's it for Google. But when I'm using the Microsoft platform for day school, it's amazing in that it integrates OneDrive directly into the actual software. So you can edit live and collaborate with the kids' single documents, and there's no worry about, format or sharing whatever, because all that's provided. So I did find the Microsoft was a little easier to give assignments that way than Google was, which I just stuck strictly with forms. So it's interesting the dichotomy between the different platforms.
Yeah, and you also made a great suggestion of making sure that teachers were limiting the ways in which students were able to submit their work, right? So I think you said you found students were submitting work via the chat. They were emailing stuff to you. And that, go ahead.
Yeah, to the point where you're starting to get pictures of screens that they then send to you in an email. Like, why not just send the file? But yeah, it's for your sanity, one. For two, you're not jumping around different platforms, but you're losing stuff. You're genuinely losing assignments. Like, sorry, I emailed it to you. Like, why'd you email it to me? It's right here. But I found the bigger problem was as soon as I started doing infographics with them, if they try to deviate from any of the formats to do their own thing, it just all falls apart. Because they're trying to use it on their own little platforms. So either sticking with one format in specific, like Word or that enables you, one, to limit how they can kind of modify the format, but two, it also allows you to provide feedback, because if they start submitting things in things like PDF or other more obscure like text formats, you can't actually put comments inside the documents, which is a big deal we found with Con Ed. Weird story, but if you do make comments in Google Docs, if you're doing private comments, those actually don't get saved to the file itself, which can become an issue later on with CPTs. If you want to retain the actual comments with CPTs, they have to be done inside the form, inside the document itself. So little tricks we found as we went, kind of sticking with one single format limits those kind of variables. So that really helped.
Some other amazing A&E suggestions coming from this group were offering students lots of choices in the ways in which that they submit assignments, like offering tech menu choice cards, giving them a lot of flexibility as to how they wanted to submit stuff came from this group. And I would also suggest, as far as assessment and evaluation is concerned, is that trying to incorporate the library and the digital library learning spaces into the assessments that you guys are creating, where you're actually asking students to access our schools and our boards e-resources, databases, info books, and so on through InfoBase. It can really make for much more rich assignments that are going to be addressing those big ideas of the course, instead of really just expecting the kid to Google something for anything that would involve any type of class. So that was like another really important kind of aspect of the A&E suggestions from this group. Okay, so moving to the next session was recorded lessons and recording ourselves. This is the place where all of you seem to agree that you ask students to turn your cameras off so that those images aren't captured in the recording, and that students aren't kind of using those images in inappropriate ways. A lot of you, I think it was Matt, too, suggested that you never really record the entire lesson, just the instructional portion of the lesson. Is that right, Matt? Did I get that right?
Yeah, so because of the end of last year and how it was very open, let's say, towards interpretation of how people did things, people were recording lessons for people that, were working and doing all that sort of thing. So when this new model started, I had a couple of students, especially in my grade 11 class, who didn't show up, and then they would email me or message me and be like, "Hey, sir, wasn't here, can you shoot me the recording?" And I was like, "Oh, no, I cannot shoot you the recording because there is no recording. You're supposed to be here live with me every single day." And so then they were like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And I was like, "Yeah, you are." So it was a little bit of like they needed to kind of get away from last semester's issues. And for me, I always make sure that the cameras are off if I'm recording anything. And the only thing that I really record is when I'm going over an assignment, so that if I'm going over an assignment or going over a task or an expectation, I record it, and then I post it, and so that if they are working on it later on in the day, they can go back and be like, okay, this is what he meant when he said this. They kind of watch it again. So I just record those types of things. I don't record any lessons, I guess you could say.
Vanessa?
Just to piggyback up on what Matt was saying, I like to do a screen recording of my assignment, like a little video tutorial of the expectation or of the work. So sometimes I may post that, like a little 5-minute thing that will go with the assignment if someone was away, if they had technical difficulties and couldn't be on the Zoom call and they missed something, and then that way they have that little screen recording of the assignment.
Right. And I think it was Scott that suggested that they're really not going back to watch these recordings anyway. So it's kind of a bit of a waste of time and space to be saving all that kind of data or using all that data to save these recordings.
I've never had more than 8 views.
Aww.
They don't love me.
Okay, on that note.
Only helping one, sir. That's all that matters. If only one watches it, that's all that matters.
Sure, Matt. Okay, so the next point was student well-being, and I really wanted everyone to kind of make sure that this was going to be something that was going to be addressed in the new quad that we're going to be starting in November. And Marek had a really great idea for making sure that he was addressing how students were feeling and how they were getting on in their classes.
Yeah, sure. If you just give me a second, I'm actually going to pull up my my Google Classroom so I can show you exactly what I'm doing here.
So as you're doing that, Marek, I just want to remind us that when we're talking about student well-being, we're talking about the kids in front of us, and really we're also talking about the kids that we're likely to forget, which is those ones that are online, probably fully, that are never turning on their cameras, that are going online because they want to hide, doing the same things that we've always been doing, things like looking up the student's OSR, accessing their DP Lite for their IEP, checking to see if they're on that SST list or the ELL list, or if they're getting academic resource support, contacting their guidance counselor. Those are really kind of still things that we can still be doing with those students to see if we can't support them. Marek?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share my screen right now. Never done this. Oh, there you go. Okay, so this is my career studies class, and I've got my assignments, I've got CPT, I've got the PowerPoint presentations and everything, and I do have a section here on wellness, right? And I add a few things every single day on a couple of important things to kind of help with the students' overall anxiety, angst about what's going on, schoolwork, or absolutely everything, right? So I've got even something as simple as the benefits of drinking water, right? And I go through this with my class, and sometimes I'll start this whole little topic off with a quick little poll, like, hey, how many of you drink 8 glasses of water a day? And then, there's a poll. It starts off with a little, begins a little conversation, and then we just go through, some things that something as simple as drinking enough water per day can do, right? I talk about the number one reason why you may be feeling tired during the day is because you're just not hydrated, right? And all these other things come to play as well, right? And I've got exercise, prayer and meditation, healthy sleep habits, which is an important one. I was huge with this, especially since my class is a first period class. It's right at 8:30, and I'd have an 8:30 class, but I get to work, I check my email, and at 3 a.m. I get 3 or 4 assignment submissions and things like that. So as I just really explained to them the importance of taking care of our bodies, especially coming from a phys ed background and it being important in my own life. I really try and preach that so that they can kind of use that and kind of help with some of their their anxieties and other issues like that.
So I like to do some guided meditations and mindfulness. And because I also teach French, I also do them in French. So I may take 5 minutes in the middle of, the 2.5 hours that we have, just to sort of take a break, and we do a little guided meditation, or sometimes it's at the beginning. And the kids generally find it very refreshing and some of them even take a little siesta for those 5 minutes. They're that calm, and then they get back up and then they're ready to go. And I found that works as well.
Okay, so our last topic that we wanted to address together here is this student feedback. So many of you, I was so impressed by the fact that so many teachers are asking students what they're thinking at the end of their classes, and they're getting some really honest and interesting responses. Marek, I included some of the responses that your students gave you, which is their annoyance with being asked, "Can you hear me?" and "Can you see my screen?" Why did they say those were such annoying questions that their teachers were asking them?
Yeah, it's and that was a criticism that I got. After my first week of virtual learning, I just created this anonymous Google form, and it asked about 3 questions, and then maybe add a little suggestion about the whole virtual learning thing. And because I wasn't sure if I was doing a good job, I don't have, their cameras are never on, so I'm never really getting much feedback from them. So it was interesting to see. And I thought I'd get some silly responses or something unhelpful, but it was all very, very helpful. Stuff that I would have never even considered. I used to always ask, "Hey, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?" Or "Is my screen on? Can you guys see my screen? Hello." And then slowly I started to improve that. And it just made for a nice fluid class. I would have these feedback things like maybe once every 2 weeks or so, and there was no real suggestions afterwards. But having a little bit of preparing your tech so that it's working well, and then trusting that tech is really important. And then small little tips that I found extremely useful, like making sure that I'm about an arm's length away from my camera is super important. Making sure it's eye level, making sure the lighting is in front of me instead of behind me. Stuff like that I found has been very, very helpful.
Another teacher on our team here said that they got feedback from their students that really kind of supported how important a positive teacher-student disposition is, like being happy, being jovial and engaging. They referred to some of their online teachers as being human melatonin pills. And I think that we all can appreciate what Zoom-style education can do for putting people to sleep, right? And so trying to be positive and maintaining some positivity with students online is a really kind of important thing. Another suggestion was not to be overly dependent for in-class work, right? For those students that are in class, maybe they shouldn't be on their devices when they're in there, right? Like the students that are accessing it from home and are accessing things on that are fully online, those cohort C students, they obviously need to be. But when the students are in class with us, maybe we can give them a break from having to be accessing their devices during that time. They could be doing other things like collaborating with each other, building things, dramatizing, presenting, debating. Another interesting thing, especially that Ivan had shared, was that he noticed that there were parents that were working out with their kids alongside their kids as he was doing their kind of workout instruction. And that and even Daley, I don't know if Daley's still with us, Daley's seeing, moms cooking alongside with their kids and making for dinner, whatever kind of he's demonstrating in class that day. That kind of parent involvement is like to be supported. But what it also means for us is that we have to realize that now our classroom doors are wide opened, right? Entire families, all kinds of people are listening into what's happening in our classrooms. And I think that that's something that teachers going into this new hybrid instructional model especially need to be cognizant of and aware of. Some other issues that came up as far as positivity. Matt, before I get on to my point, I'm going to ask you to jump in here. I just see your hand right now.
Just one thing that I think is super important, especially for those kids that are strictly online, is you have to be communicating with the parents, especially for the ones that are like really quiet. I found that like like the day after I collect an assignment or something, if that assignment's not in and the kid hasn't responded to me, I'm immediately calling home, just because there's a lot of them that are like, I don't know what he's doing, or he wasn't in class today. Oh my gosh, that's such a surprise. And then they get on them, and then it becomes a little bit easier to kind of deal with. But especially those quiet kids that, like you said, are kind of like hiding online. If you let them hide, then they're not going to get as much out of it as you kind of need. So I don't know, just you said something about parents, so that popped into my head, just how important it is, like, to make sure that parents know what you're doing inside the class a little bit, so that they don't, because some of them, even like I had parents that didn't even know we were done in November. They thought I was their teacher for the whole semester. And I was like, no, we just have a couple of weeks left. And she was like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And she's like, what happens after that? I said, all new teachers. And so they just didn't know. So it's just super important for those kids that are quiet and not doing anything, I think.
Vanessa?
It's important that you message the kids. If the students are messaging you because they have questions or concerns, or whatever the case may be, there's something going on in their life, they need to reach out. It's important that you get back to them in a timely manner. I mean, if we're expecting these kids to be on the ball and getting everything into us when we're assigning it, when it's due, then we need to also step up and have that common courtesy that if they message us, that we get back to them as soon as possible. Because like you said, we only have 9 weeks. We need to maximize every second.
Marek, did you want to pop in and just add, you had some responses there relating to student feedback on email.
Yeah, student feedback on email. So I found that, a lot of the questions that students had were sent to me in the evenings, right? And I would just make it part of my daily habit to, check in at about maybe 8 o'clock for about, 10, 15 minutes just to reply to those things. And I know it's definitely not a requirement of us teachers to do so, but I think the benefits of that really outweigh not doing it. I think it builds the right rapport with those students. And it allows them, and it kind of helps them buy into the whole idea of virtual learning, which I think is extremely important. And once they buy in, then you've got them, right? And then they're paying attention to your lessons. They're handing things in on time. They're trying to improve and really focus on their learning. So I found it very beneficial.
I just really want to thank everyone for spending the last 2 hours talking about all these great ideas that you have for teachers in the coming into the hybrid on November 13th. I think you guys are all doing an amazing job, and I'm pretty sure that the rest of our staff is really going to enjoy and appreciate hearing all the tips that you guys have been able to share with them. So thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.